So I'm going to go through the solution to the last question from today's lesson on midpoint of a line. So this question is a little bit more involved, and so it serves in a way as an introduction to the questions that are going to be coming in the next few days. So in this example, it says, for the triangle with vertices P, Q, and R, and I want you to take close note of R because I've gone ahead and made these numbers a little friendlier. So instead of the existing number, which I believe is 5 and -3, I've changed it to 6 and -2, and that will make some of our numbers a little nicer to work with for this example. So I'm just going to pause the video and draw a little diagram for myself of this little triangle. So I've gone ahead and sketched out my triangle here. And so let's look at what the question actually is asking us to find. It says find an equation for the median from vertex P. So you'll remember that a median is a line that goes from a vertex, in this case vertex P, and hits the opposite side at the midpoint. So in other words, and divides that line segment in two. So in other words, I need to find the equation of the line going from P to the midpoint of QR. That is my midpoint, or that is the point of this question. So in order to do that, I need to figure out what the midpoint is of QR. So that is the first step to solving this question. Okay, so find the midpoint of QR. So pause the video and go ahead and do that and come back when you're ready to check your answer. So I went ahead and calculated the midpoint, and when you do that, the answer that I get for the midpoint is at 5 and 2. And so let me take a look at my graph here. So some of you may be saying, well, I can just get that from the graph. And yeah, that's true. But when the question says for you to get the equation of the line, you may want to be particular. In this case, it is fairly obvious, but in some cases, you might end up with decimals or fractions for that midpoint. So make sure you know how to do this algebraically. So I'm going to go ahead and plot that midpoint at 5 and 2. So right here, and it looks right, so I can feel pretty confident about that. And then I'm going to write that in 5, 2. So really, I'm looking for the equation of the line going from vertex P over to M. All right, so this line right here, I'm going to draw that in actually so that I can see it. I don't want it shadowed. Here we go. So roughly there. Okay, not quite. I haven't quite done that precise, but you get the gist of it. So I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller. Oops, let me undo that. That's not going to work. So step number 2 that I need to take now, and this is going to be my step number 2 here, is I'm going to need to find the equation of the line. But in order to do that, I need to know the slope of the line. So my next step is to calculate the slope of PM. Okay, so pause the video now. I'd like you to calculate the slope of PM using whichever method you prefer, and resume the video when you are ready. So I went ahead and calculated the slope algebraically. I just felt for me that was the quickest way to do it, but remember you could also count squares, right? So I can see here that my rise is 4 and my run is 14. Right, so 4 over 14 reduces to give me 2 over 7, so either way that will work, but you know, it's easier to work with 2 over 7, and you really should be reducing those fractions. So either way you do that, that works out. All right, so the next thing, so oopsies, there we go. So the next thing we need to do, because remember we're finding the equation of the line. So in order to find the equation of the line, we needed the slope. And so we also need to figure out what the y-intercept is. And though we can sort of speculate what that is, because it looks like it's, you know, around, I'm not sure what that is, it may be quicker or more accurate for us to do this algebraically. So, and in some questions, it may not be as obvious. So I'm going to go ahead and do this algebraically. And we've done lots of practice with this. So the next step is we're going to solve for the y-intercept. Okay? So you'll remember that our equation is in the form y equals mx plus b. And we've just solved for m. And we now need to find b. So in order to do that, I can use any coordinate that is on that line. And so I'm going to choose to use point P. But I could have chosen any other point. I could have chosen point M as well. So I'm going to choose point P at -2 and 0. And I'm going to sub that in for x and for y in my formula. Okay, so 0 is equal to, and my slope was 2/7 times whatever x is. In this case, x was 0. No, it's not. That's a lie. X was -2. And then plus b. Okay, and so now I'm going to work that out. And that will give me, clean this up a bit, 0 is equal to 2 times -2 gives me -4 over 7. And then plus b. So now I can bring my -4/7 to the other side of the equation, and that will give me a value for b. I'm going to write it just over here, that b is equal to 4/7. So now I'm in a situation where I have the slope of my line, I have the y-intercept, and so the last and final step that I need to do is to write out my equation. So I'm going to do that right over here. Let me get rid of some of this other stuff. Write out equation. Of the median. So y is equal to mx plus b. Y is equal to 2/7 x plus 4/7, and I'm good to go. Now, just for fun, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and multiply this whole thing by 7 to get it into standard form. The question doesn't ask that, but let's just practice anyway. So if I multiply everything by 7, then the equation that results is 7y equals 2x plus 4. And getting this into standard form means moving everything to one side, making sure my x coefficient is positive, so 2x minus 7y plus 4, and now it's in standard form. All right, so that is it for that question. Lots of steps there. Hopefully with practice you can do that a little bit more efficiently than we just did in that practice. Here are the homework questions for you to get ready for your quiz, which will be tomorrow.